Welcome to the Recovery Stories podcast, bringing you stories of hope, healing, and triumph over the bondage of addictions, mental health struggles, trauma, and dysfunctional family systems. Our courageous storytellers have chosen to live their journey out loud in order to show others that they don't have to suffer in silence. The stories you will hear are raw, real, and may involve graphic and triggering content. This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's Rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or are ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 888-648-4098. Or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Rooted Recovery Stories podcast. I'm your guest host today, Erica Francis with WKRN News 2. So happy to be a part of this show today, especially to spread hope this holiday season.
Thank you so much, Erica, for joining us. I can't think of a more positive and engaging person to help me tell my personal story on this issue. And thank you for saying yes. For those of you who don't know or are just catching up, throughout December, Recovery Stories is collaborating with Nashville Neurosurgery Associates to highlight stories of survival from life-altering neurosurgical disorders. The holidays can be difficult for people suffering with adversity, especially acute medical conditions. To someone fighting these battles, it can feel like the whole world is passing by as other people remain so hyper-focused on crossing off to-do lists and completing obligations. So our goal this season is to bring visibility to some of these issues and help those struggling to feel seen and provide hope. So as I said before, today we're telling my story, and I needed to bring on somebody to help me tell it because it's just that much better to do so. So anyway, Erica, thanks so much.
Of course. I'm so happy you asked me, and I can't wait to hear more. And I'm sure you're not only going to inspire me, but a lot of other people. So my first question is, I want you to take me back to what life was like before this diagnosis.
Sure. So a lot of people might already know this if you are a regular on the podcast or you know me personally, but it's worth mentioning that I am a person in long-term recovery. I'm a Nashville native, and I was raised in a really good family, but we also have the genes for addiction and all the red flags that presented themselves for me that said, hey, you might not want to mess with alcohol. I did it anyway. I did all the right things to keep me away from, that anybody would say you should do as a kid. I did well in school. I didn't get involved with the wrong crowd, but it caught up with me in college, which is where I started drinking for the first time. I just got heavily involved in drinking like a lot of people do. But for me, I couldn't slow down. I couldn't press pause. And in under 4 years, I was at the point of drinking around the clock, like a handle of liquor every single day. Couldn't go hours without drinking because I go into withdrawal. And so my life at that point was really on the line. I was experiencing neuropathy in my fingers and my toes because of it. It was a severe point in life. So I got sober back in 2011, went to treatment. My life was forever changed. And I started working in this field of behavioral health. And like I said, I love it so much. So obviously I stayed. I love helping people that are in the shoes that I was in. And so little backstory there because it relates to my medical stuff that came up that we're focusing on today. So in 2016, actually a little bit before 2016, I started to have some crazy symptoms that were just really out of the norm for me. My heart rate would randomly skyrocket. I would all of a sudden feel like my lungs wouldn't expand. I'd have random paralysis, if you will. It was really bizarre because at some points I could move, but it would happen a lot of times where I'd be driving and all of a sudden I wouldn't feel like I could turn the steering wheel and I couldn't draw a breath. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I also, like, when I would exercise, it started to get more and more. I was a big CrossFitter at the time. So big CrossFitter. And so, CrossFit's an hour long. And I started to notice that towards the end of our CrossFit workouts, I would, what a lot of people call red line, like where you push yourself too hard, I get out of breath. And then, and that was one of the first things that gave me a signal that something wasn't right, because it would happen to me like 55 minutes and I get, I could less and less time of exercising before I would get to this place where all of a sudden I felt like I was gonna pass out or die. Like, it was horrible. And this was completely out of the normal for me. And it wasn't getting better, it was getting worse. And then it started to happen in normal life randomly. So, I mean, I did what anybody would do. I started going to the doctor saying something's not right, and with all the symptoms I reported, I kept getting diagnosed with anxiety, panic attacks,
They
all the
always
things.
start with that first.
Mhm.
It's
Well,
like somebody has problems and it's like, oh, it's anxiety. I mean, because anxiety can give you a lot of different things, but I've heard that story time and time again.
mhm. And when I talk to some of the neurosurgeons today, they always put their foot forward first with talking about statistics. And statistically, when it comes to these extreme conditions, it's way more likely that somebody is suffering with anxiety, depression. I mean, that's very common, right? And so and that's how medicine works. You go in with symptoms, and they start with the most common thing that they can think of and try and knock it down, see if it helps. I remember we went through a whole trial of different allergy medications, because they thought that like something was pressure was causing different things. And so anyway, none of that stuff worked. A lot of it messed with my head, and those meds messed with my head and just made things worse. And it kept getting, worse and worse. But what do? You gotta go back, keep going to work. You gotta wake up another day and hold hope and faith that either you're going to get better or some answers are going to come.
What was that like to not have answers? Because I've been in a situation like that, and I can tell you it's very frustrating.
That's a great question. And I think that anybody struggling with the unknown, which I firmly believe is, I didn't coin this phrase, but it's the greatest fear that humankind faces, is the fear of the unknown, right? And that was worse than ultimately when I found out what the answer was. When you're suffering with problems that are affecting your quality of life, and you don't know what the answer is, and the people who should, you hope, you look to give you the answers, aren't able to tell you either. And, and you're scared. For me, everybody in my life, my family and support system was reinforcing what the doctors were saying. So there started this theme for me of being a hypochondriac and not being believed. And, today, I don't blame anybody for that, because they were doing the best that they could with the knowledge that they had. If they're being told this is what it looks like and this is how you can support him, they're trying to do that. And the whole time, my thing that I was saying over and over is, I'm trying to believe what the doctors say and do what they say, but something is not clicking. There's an incongruency here. And, I'm noticing a shift, and it's not a shift in the right direction. And so, not being believed and also not knowing what's wrong can really put you, and definitely put me in, it started off one of the loneliest times of my life.
Yeah. So then you're dealing with, all of these health issues. Then you're dealing with loneliness. I don't know if that loneliness ended up turning into depression. But it just sounds like that could have been just kind of like the start to just going downhill, and real fast.
Mm-hmm. I think there is a certain level of depression that attacks anybody with this kind of situation where you don't know, and I'm so grateful that I credit my mom. She is I would say a warrior of hope. And what I mean by that is, like, in childhood, when she was she was our primary caregiver and helping to frame our worldview, she definitely did a champion's job at presenting the theme for us that at all costs, never lose hope. And we have faith. I grew up in a household of faith. And so that was something that was very significant to me as well. So while, yes, symptoms of despair and depression and fear were plaguing me, the things that I think kept me going were that hope and that resiliency that was bred in me at an early age.
I'm so happy to hear that you're a faithful person, because that definitely helps and it pulls you through some really tough times. So I want you to talk to me about the day where that diagnosis finally came. And you said it was almost I don't want to say it probably was a relief for you, but in a strange sense. I mean, obviously it's awful news, but you said that it was almost better to hear that than when you were experiencing no answers at all, right?
Yep. So imagine the worst thing in your life happening to you and not being believed. It's terrible, right? And like I said, that was my story. And so I kept getting worse and worse to the point where my symptoms were so strong. I was in and out of the emergency room, and pretty much the last week before I finally, I don't really remember why we had not done an MRI on my brain. I remember at one point, it was a Thursday. We're sitting in my primary care physician's office, and she's got like a what do you call it for football? That chart up on the like a bracket. So all the tests we had done and the tests we had yet to do, and as you go along, that list of tests gets smaller and smaller, what you're going to do next. And I remember this light bulb going off in her head and her just turning around and looking at me with this, oh my goodness, thought in her eyes, and goes, "When was the last time we did an MRI on your brain?" And I said, "We haven't done one." Something had happened the year before. This is how long I had been going through testing, and they had ordered one a year before, and something happened and we never got it. So she ordered one. We got it done the next day. They called me into the hospital the day after that, or not the hospital, the doctor's office. And I got the call actually, and they said, the nurse said, we need you to come in to talk about your results, and please don't drive yourself. And that call was at 6 a.m. in the morning. I knew something was wrong.
Right.
So, you asked me earlier about what I was feeling and thinking, my emotions about all of this. I think it's worth mentioning here that from an early age, and I know this is so odd, but my greatest fear, I always struggled with the fear of death. I don't think it's that abnormal for humans to do that.
Right.
But I had a very specific fear that I was going to get a brain tumor and die.
What? My camera just moved. I was that shocked. Wait, what? That's crazy.
Yeah. To the point where it was something that I mean, on a nearly daily basis, in some points through my life and development, it was a daily basis where that would, I'd lie awake at night, be thinking about that. And I'd have to I'd pray, I'd do, things to cope with that fear. But it was my ultimate worst fear. So you can imagine, I get this news. I already knew. I mean, they just scanned my head. So I knew that it was something brain related and most likely a tumor. And so I got the news, and they can never tell when. So I go into the doctor's office, and my goodness, I have the best primary care physician in the world. She's such a wonderful woman. And my husband, Jeremy, goes with me, and he's sitting next to me, and she rolls her chair over and puts her hand on my knee and says, "Patrick, I think we found, the issue, what's going on to cause all your symptoms." And she takes a deep breath. And I'm like, "Oh gosh, okay, what is it?" She's like, "We found a mass in your brain, and it's, there's a lot of things we don't know." And she just paused. And I'm thinking, of course, I go straight to this place of, I don't know how or why, but I just go straight to this place of, okay, well, I'm thinking of all the people I know with benign brain tumors that they're still sitting in their brain, just, it's fine and whatever. And I'm like, and I think even her daughter actually has one. And I was like, "Well, what about your daughter and this person, that person?" I'm like, there's tons of people that have brain tumors, right? Like it could be completely fine. And she goes, "Sweetheart, I just want to be honest with you. I don't think it's something like that." It basically, she had to report. She's not a, neurologist or neurosurgeon, or an oncologist, right? So she's just reporting what their findings were, and until they could do further testing. And she said, it looks like this certain type of tumor that starts in the spine and spreads to the brain secondarily, and is usually, most of the time, a somewhat aggressive form of cancer. And so, at that point, anytime anybody hears the C word, like, the air was pulled out of me. Like at that time, I couldn't draw a breath. And I don't think it was because of my symptoms for my brain tumor. It was purely because of the shock that I was going through, and I just can't even describe the moment of what that feels like.
Yeah, I can't imagine either. What was Jeremy's response?
So, you said, we were talking about how, the whole thing of, people not being believed, and it's not him, it's not my nobody thought that this was a super serious thing. They thought it was all in my head. And we joke about that now because it was in my head, just in a different way than everyone thought. Right.
Yeah.
And so he immediately went to a place of maybe more shock than me, because I don't think that there was any space in his mind that considered this a real possible reality, even though he knew it was serious, because they're having me drive in. They never have somebody drive you in and talk about test results like that if it's not something serious. But yeah, I don't know we talk about the 5 stages of grief, and I don't remember what they all are, but it's like denial, bargaining, all those things.
Acceptance, I know, is one.
Right. Well, he definitely wasn't acceptance, and I wasn't either.
Not in the beginning, no.
Right. So what she had said was, "We need to get you in to run full body scans and more tests. We don't know what's to come, but it's highly likely that, we'll need to do surgery relatively soon. So, go spend the evening with your family and pack a bag, and we need you to be here at, I don't know, 6 a.m. the next morning." And that was like I honestly, more than any other time during this whole saga, I think I blacked out for the rest of that day, because I guess just because shock is quite a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And yeah. And so anyway, I end up going, into the hospital. They run scans, and fortunately, the tumor that I had was isolated in my cerebellum, and that rear part of your brain. It wasn't in my spine, so it was a good sign. But they never know until pathology's back what the tumor is. So We got a little bit of hope, but at the same time knew that brain surgery was needed quickly. So within a couple days, I was in the hospital the whole time, and within a couple days, I was in brain surgery.
Oh my gosh. That is
Yeah.
crazy. And that's crazy that they get you in so quickly, but I guess it's an emergency at that point. So do they do that for
Yeah.
most people?
It just depends on how urgent the situation is.
That goes to show how urgent
And
yours was then.
right,
Mhm.
right. So, excuse me. Normally, I don't do this much talking on the podcast. So I'm extra thirsty today.
I get it.
So, yeah, I go into surgery, and I remember thinking, back to what you said. What was it like getting that news? And I guess I failed to answer at that point, but I went into shock. But I remember just as equally as much as I was in shock, I was so grateful to finally have an answer, that having that answer, even though it was really bad, was somewhat of a weird comfort to me. So the next goalpost I had was, get this thing out of me. Like, I was not scared of surgery at all. Like, I was like, let's go. Game time. I would like to just be knocked out so that I can wake up and be on the other side of this.
Yeah.
I don't even want to think about what could happen. I don't want to, you got to have surgery. It's going to happen. I don't want to hear about the possibilities. Let's go. And so we did. I woke up from surgery, worst pain of my life. And that time it was, I was pretty okay. I think for recovery from brain surgery, everything went like they wanted it to. I was there for probably a little under a week, and then discharged, went home, and was recovering for, I don't know, probably about 3 weeks, when I started to feel different and like something wasn't right again. And again, I was like, yo, I think something's not right. I feel different. And
Oh no.
you have to imagine, and I give my family and my friends a break here, because they were dealing with someone who, for, I don't know, the better part of 2.5 years, I had all these symptoms and everything. And you deal with somebody long enough, and you have it in your brain that they're just dealing with high amounts of anxiety. This is just them. They're a hypochondriac. It's hard to take, and even though they had an answer and they knew that wasn't the case anymore, it's very difficult to take somebody and move them to a different, like, oh, that actually wasn't real. That wasn't true. So again, something was wrong. I felt like I knew it. It got worse and worse. I felt like I knew it, and everybody's like, it's just chill, whatever. And finally, like my head had swollen up like a melon in the back, which is where I've got like we call it my zipper on the back of my head, where they opened me up. There was something severely wrong. So I go into the ER, and lo and behold, there was a major infection. I had MRSA, which stands for methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, the super scientific word for the worst kind of staph you can get. It's you can't treat it, I don't think, with antibiotics, and it's spreads really quick. It's super dangerous in the body, especially when your blood-brain barrier has been opened, for brain surgery. So anyway, super scary stuff. And they had to go in very quickly to clean out. They opened my head and had to literally medically clean out my entire head and send me back, do emergency brain surgery again.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So there's so many details to this.
But I'm so fascinated, and I can't believe that you went through this. Wow. Yeah, so keep going.
Okay. So imagine, if you will, your I got a big science lesson through all of this, and I asked all the questions because I wanted to know what was going on with my body, right? Like,
Yeah.
so your brain and your spine is surrounded by this membrane sac called the dura, and it holds in all your cerebrospinal fluid, which is supposed to flow. It flows through your brain and through your spinal cord and everything, and it goes in one direction and goes, just like your blood does, through your vascular system. And that membrane that holds everything in, the dura, for me, because where my tumor was and how they had to get in there and everything, there was a pretty big opening, the incision they made. And that dura is not the most, it doesn't heal super great. It's kind of a difficult thing. It's not like skin. They have different ways of fixing it. And they can either do it, if it's small enough, they can do little sutures. Mine wasn't small enough. They can do either a cadaver patch or a synthetic patch. So I don't remember the order that they did mine, but the first surgery, they did one of them. And this second surgery, when they sewed me back up, they had to replace it because the MRSA had affected that whole lining. And they could, of course, couldn't risk it passing through that lining into the blood-brain barrier, because it's like KO if that happens. So they do the second option, whatever the alternative was for that patch, replace it there. And it's touch and go, because that liquid can't really, your cerebrospinal fluid can't leak out of that whole area. You can have like little minor leaks that have to heal, but you're going to have symptoms. I mean, you can't have a major leak. It's got to heal, because you'll die otherwise. And I was it was leaking. It was horrible. I had to stay flat for a long period of time. I had a really hard time following instructions because I didn't understand the gravity of what they were asking me to do. And so, mind you, this is a great point, a great time to insert that I had no choice during this entire saga. I had to be on, heavy narcotics for the better part of 6 months. And that was never part of my addiction journey. So I had never been on them, and I didn't know, so I'm like different than I normally am when all this is going on.
To say the least. Yeah.
To say the least. Yeah. And so anyway, I had this trouble, and it was, I take all that time to explain about the dura and the spinal fluid leaking and all of that, because that is just as much of a serious issue that had to get repaired quickly as my brain tumor was. And things can go wrong just as fast, if even not even faster, if it's not dealt with. So anyway, had to lay flat for a long time, had to stay in the neuro ICU. But things started to look up. I started to heal, and this is a point too where I'll say, you have a major incident like this where something goes so severely wrong. And, if you're fortunate enough, which I think many people are, people in your life wrap around you like a community. They already are a community, but they wrap around you with such heavy support. And, whether it's on Facebook text messages, visiting when they can, you name it, you feel very seen in certain ways. People pop out of the woodwork. At least that was my experience, and it meant the world to me. But with this second surgery, things started to get a little bit more precarious because MRSA was involved. And so I remember some people in my life were allowed to visit me, but visitation was restrictive. Disease control precautions are heightened. And so, it was just a different scenario. So anyway, but I make it through. I get out of the hospital a few weeks later. I think it was in like 2 weeks that time. And I get home, a few more weeks of recovery, and lo and behold, the same damn thing happens to me.
What?
Yeah. And at this point, I had already done I'd actually had a family member die of MRSA infection that had gone septic like years ago.
Oh
And
no.
so, yeah, when you already know somebody that's had that
Yeah.
happen, it's like, it makes it that much extra scary. So I, I kind of laugh about it ironically now, but there's not a laughing matter.
Yeah.
But go back into the hospital, and I remember my neurosurgeon, which I believe I had the best one in the world, Dr. Robbie Franklin from Nashville Neurosurgery. He came in and said, look, here's I got to level with you. Here's the reality. We can go in. It's the MRSA. It's very, the fact that it has, it's still there, which nobody ever knows why you get an infection. It can happen for any number of reasons. And the best valiant try can still yield the same results. Sometimes you never know how hard your body's going to fight to get rid of an infection. And so, he's explaining all of this to me. And the biggest thing was that membrane. The reason why I took so long to explain that earlier, because at this point, that was the biggest concern, was that we were out of options with how they typically close the membrane up. The first two, cadaver and synthetic patches, weren't working. It's not protocol to do one again once the body's rejected it once. And so, for what I understand, what he was offering was a last resort, and something that I don't know is typically done. It was like a long shot, basically, to close that membrane up. But in the back of my head, he was gonna sew up the whatever those trunk muscles are that hold your head up. You reach back there and you feel those two muscles.
Yeah, I'm
that
getting chills thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like sewing it up.
Right.
Man.
So, they had to get back there. He had to cut through it every time, and
I
so,
know.
yeah. So, but, he had to basically sew those muscles up really tight behind the membrane. And I had to lay flat for an indefinite period of time. So I was like, yeah, okay. Again, I approached this with the same kind of, I guess, attitude I did that first brain surgery, where I was like, let's just go in. Like, okay, it's the only option. Then I have no decision to make. Like, I'm not going to be like, no, I'm just.
Well, were you losing hope at any point during this time? It's like, oh, come on, not again.
So, I'm glad you asked that, because, every time, and especially this time, I remember, and I don't know what I thought was going to happen when I went into the hospital, because, I knew that the infection was bad. Like, the same thing had happened again. Right. Like, and so when he comes back in and he's like, we're going to have to do surgery again, I remember my heart sank down to my stomach first, and thinking, oh my gosh, this can't be happening again. I've been in the hospital so long. I can't. I felt like a certain level of hope, the carpet of hope, had been pulled out from underneath me. And, but that's when, like I said, I was like, let's do it. Let's go. I just don't want to spend any more time on this end of it. Let's do the surgery. And right. So we get on the other side. And that was actually, I lied earlier when I said it was the worst pain of my life. Waking up from this surgery was the absolute worst. They had to do all kinds of things back there, like I said, to try and close up all that tissue in a way that was foreign. Like, your body, you're not supposed to happen in your body. And so I was flat in the neuro ICU for a while, because they were waiting for that membrane to try. And if you have an opening in the membrane and you stand up, the pressure can shoot the liquid out. But as long as you're flat, you're more likely to not have leakage, right? Like, so that's why they want you to stay flat if there's an issue with your, with any of that. So, So I'm having to stay flat that whole time. And oh my gosh. So it was really, I mean, it was just really, really rough and touch and go because it kept leaking, even though I was flat. I was in and out of like my cognitively, I was here, gone, all those things. And so you asked about hope, and that was the point where was truly the loneliest I've ever been in my life, because it wasn't even like my second brain surgery when my parents and my husband were the only people that could come visit me, and they would come for the period of time that they could. But at this point, I didn't have anything to talk about. They didn't have anything to talk about other than, how are you? We love you, whatever. So they would come and, and spend time with me and share that, hold space, to make me feel to be there every day, the time that they could. And, but they were the only people I could see. And even the staff, when the staff would come in, they would like has full on like what do you call it? Protective gear, because at this point it was we're talking about a whole nother level of infection control. So I don't really know if it's to protect them or to keep them from giving me germs. But either way, all of these things expounded upon each other, and I felt like kind of like the boy in the bubble, if you will. And it lasted for so long. And the problem was, I think that exacerbated my loneliness, is that nobody could tell me any definitive answers on, nobody could give me technically hope. I remember seeing, it's kind of hard for me to say, and I know it hurts my parents when they hear this, but I've never seen, my parents, like I said, are people of faith. And I have never seen them lose hope. I never seen them in all my trials and tribulations in my life, seen them lose hope for me. But especially this last time, I remember the way that they, even the people I'd talked to on the phone, the people were dropping off. And when I would talk to them, the tone of voice that they talked to me with was so different. And I don't think they even realized that it was one of a loss of hope, because, at this point, the tumor's gone, all these things, but we're dealing with secondary issues that could go south at any second. And we're just hoping that my body is going to cling on to the healing procedures that have, taken place. And, it was just touch and go every day. And so that was truly like the loneliest I've ever felt. But I don't say that to paint myself as some victim at all. Going through all of this, but especially that period of time, brought me to a different level of faith. I had some conversations, my higher power, I call God, I had some deep conversations and came to some different understandings and some just different places mentally with how I was approaching my own mortality, that I don't know that anything outside of that experience could have taken me to. And, so, that's one of the reasons why I want to tell my story. When I talk about loneliness and when I talk about feeling seen, when it's either unknown what's going on with you and it's severely wrong, or it's known what's going on with you and the solution is unknown, and or whether or not your body's going to respond, there's almost no one in the world that can really understand exactly where you are and what you're feeling. At least it feels like that, right? Well, like I didn't have a connection to other people who had been where I had been.
And that's kind of why you do this podcast, right?
Absolutely.
Spread that awareness and to give people more hope and understanding. Somebody else went through this. Hey, you can get through it too.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I wish I could say, when we talk about like recovery from addiction and mental health, everybody's outcome is different. And it's easier for me to be like, hey, there's an answer to addiction and I know that it works and you
Right.
can get, when it comes to other things like medical stuff, when I talk about hope, I have to be honest and say, listen, I'm not going to try and provide you or anybody else false hope. What I can talk about is what it felt like for me. I can listen to your experience and what it feels like for you. And I can share with you what helped me make it through those baby steps of the day, what helped me hang on to the hope that I needed to through the darkest of times. And if that makes a difference in somebody's life, it's absolutely worth it.
That was beautiful. I have a two-part question for you because they're kind of
Yeah.
related in a sense, but you mentioned that this whole diagnosis and everything that you went through, after the tumor, which sounds just as bad, if not worse, like you were kind of mentioning. And you mentioned that you realized that you kind of started to have a better relationship with God, or, what other people might call it, just a higher power. But did you ever ask him, why me? And then, do you ever feel like this happened to you for a reason, so you would become closer to God?
No, I didn't wonder why me. I mean, I have thought, I have had those thoughts of, especially now, like, how interesting is that, this fear I had, from a young age, all those things. I think that I am of the belief that there are things far beyond my finite comprehension as a human being and questions that I could ask over and over, and demand an answer to that I probably won't ever get an answer to while I'm here on Earth. I don't know. I've just never felt like that's something like I don't know the answer to that. I don't think I'll ever be able to know the answer to that, but I do believe that it is my responsibility to take everything, all of the blemishes, either the mistakes or the damage that's happened, and use it, because it is all usable to produce good in the world. And if my life was spared just for that reason, I'm going to make sure that I continue to do good with that. I'm not going to let, the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth chance, which we haven't even gotten into. There's actually more, that I'm not going to let it go to waste. And my story is full of hope, and again, I just want to touch on this. I have people come to me all the time and say, hey, I've got so-and-so who just got diagnosed with a brain tumor. Will you talk to them? I love doing that because it's, like I said, it's a connection point, and it's something that I can do, and I can hopefully help somebody else feel like they are less alone than they were before talking to me. But I also approach those conversations with this reverence that I never knew my outcome was going to be this, but where hindsight's 2020, I am happy, healthy, and have a great prognosis to live the rest of my life, without recurrence.
Wow.
And so I do have a great level of reverence when doing talks like this and sharing my story. And I think it's so important to recognize, again, everybody's story is not the same, and not everybody has the same outcome when we're talking about hope. But that's why I think it's so important when we talk about perspective and coping skills and what have you, because those are the things that make the biggest difference when we're talking about stuff like this.
So bring me back to the story. We're on your third. We're on second infection.
Third brain surgery, recovering from third brain surgery, second Yeah, I
I
guess
know. I think,
the
yeah,
counting for that is weird. Yes.
I'm bad
So,
with numbers. I'm a news anchor.
right. Yeah. So, in all fairness, yeah, it's wonky numbers anyway. So, yes, recovering from the third brain surgery, and I don't even know how we're weeks in. I'm still in the hospital, and their concern at this point is that I'm not walking, and so they get me up and they want to get me walking again because I haven't walked in at this point. It was probably more closer to a month, and I couldn't walk. Like they tried to get me to do a half lap around the little tiny neuro ICU ring, like around the nurse's station, and they had somebody under each arm, and like my legs weren't working. So they sent me to a rehab center, one of the rehab hospital on the other side of Nashville, and I get there. I was there for hours. I knew something was wrong. I was like, this feels weird. I mean, like we started and I made it through like 20 minutes of PT. And I told the physical therapist, I was like, I need to see the doctor. Something's not right. It's in my leg. It's different than I've ever been. So I go back to the room. I knew it was a blood clot. I go back to the room.
Hold on. What is with your intuition? This is wild.
So I go back to the room. The doctor comes in. He talks to me. He's like, "Hi, Mr. Custer. Yada yada yada." He inspects my leg. It doesn't look any different. He says all the things. He's like, "We really don't think you're not showing any signs of blood clot. You haven't walked in a really long time, so this probably just feels really weird to you." And I'm like, "Yeah, thank you for that perspective, but I have a little trust issue going on, and if this is a thing about getting insurance to authorize, I'll pay for the scan out of pocket. Like I need reassurance that I don't have a blood clot if I don't have a blood clot." So they bring in the little whatever, it's like a sonar or something. It's the same thing they do on your belly if you're pregnant, to look at the babies. And they scan my leg. Lo and behold, they find a blood clot. Doctor comes in. He's like, "Sir, you are in." I don't know what word he used, but basically like, "This is really strange and I would have never been able to predict this," and yada, yada, whatever. So they send me back to the main hospital, and I go in and I get scans because they have to make sure and see if there's blood clots in the rest of the body. Usually they start in your leg and they end up going to your lungs and or heart. Or yeah, I think I said that right. And then potentially your brain, which is the scariest part. So get to the hospital, and what do you know? I have 2 major pulmonary embolisms, or emboli, I don't know, which is big blood clots in my lungs. So I get put on a protocol for that. I'm having breathing trouble at this point. They put me on oxygen. So I'm in the ICU again for however long, which coupled with this, I get really sick with double pneumonia. So that was the other thing. I'm having breathing trouble, and they're like, "Oh, well, maybe it's whatever." I think they thought it was the blood clot or whatnot. But so I've got double pneumonia, both kinds of pneumonia, and a blood clot in each lung. And so goes on the recovery process. And this one's bad. I mean, this is rough when you're talking about that many things wrong in your lungs. So I end up, I don't even remember. I have some more weeks of touch and go, and I end up recovering, and they send me home, and I'm on oxygen for a long period of time. I don't know, a couple months after that, and blood thinners. And finally it was like December. So this all started in July and ended in December, the first part of January, when I finally like came off oxygen and everything. So that was the official end of my brain tumor saga. That I say brain tumor because it was all like secondary stuff wrapped up into one.
God really wanted you alive.
Yeah.
After all that, he's like, "No, we're giving you another chance." So you're right. Yeah. Now you better use that. And you are.
Right. Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. So after you got off oxygen, what have you, were things still a little bit different? I mean, did you have to, I know the tumor was in the back of your head. I didn't know if that impacted any of your memory or anything like that.
So great question. I don't. You would think I would have studied enough of this in all of the downtime I had, and who knows, I may have and forgot it. But
Well,
my memory isn't great, but I don't think it's because of anything they did inside my brain.
okay.
I think that there's a lot of residual from how many. I mean, in total for surgery, we're talking. I was under anesthesia, like heavy anesthesia, for probably totaling 20 something hours. And that affects your brain for a really long time. Foggy, your cognitive levels, everything like that. So yeah, there's some of that, but other than that, my brain, I think, works well. Your cerebellum, where my tumor was, it has a lot to do with your balance and different things. I mean, I don't really struggle with anything like that. I will say that I got some what I refer to as party favors left over from, the brain has a way of kind of making I don't even know if it's like a photocopy, but it's like maybe a neuro pathway. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but the symptoms that I was experiencing, the cause is gone. The tumor's gone. It's not pressing down on those cranial nerves anymore. But I have flashbacks that cause me to experience phantom symptoms sometimes, which is, it is what it is, but I know how to deal with them. And they actually cause me to have panic attacks,
Oh my gosh.
which, go figure, I've got plenty of tools to help me deal with it now. And they're not fun, but you do what you can and move forward.
How often does that happen, by the way?
It comes and the frequency comes and goes.
Okay.
I might go 6 months without an episode, and then I might have a week where it happens every single day. So, but like I said, thanks to modern medicine and a lot of wonderful therapy, like coping techniques and practices, figuring out how to ground myself. There's a lot of great, if I could speak to one of the things that helped me so much when we talk about coping mechanisms through all of this, excuse me, exercises in practicing the simple action. I say simple because it's not easy, but it is simple. Letting go. We cling to something a difficult thought, something we don't want to accept so much. But when, for instance, like I would go back and forth from this bargaining phase of, am I going to die? I don't know, in this fear vortex where it was preventing me from feeling like I would get stuck in this place where I couldn't think, I couldn't see straight. And I came to a place where I was able to find a balance between having faith and also saying, I'm human, I don't know what's going to happen. And I can have faith while at the same time accept that I don't know what's going to happen. Because I was wrestling with this whole, if I have faith, then I believe that I will be fine. And that is what it has to be, and it was a paradox that I couldn't tease apart, but it wasn't until I practiced radical acceptance that I had no control over it. I was laying my faith at the feet of God, and truly just letting go of what was to come next. If it was, there were many times where I said to myself, if this is it, if I'm about to die, then I'm going to make peace with it. And I would make peace with it. I would feel better and be able to move on to the next moment.
Wow.
And so there were that conversation in my head, in addition to many other. So acceptance, practicing the process of letting go, and different techniques of grounding myself. This one I'll just say, I'm not going to say it well, but there are different spots on your head and that go down through your face that are, I don't remember what the importance of them is, but a therapist coached me through this. That is a helpful grounding technique when you're experiencing, the onset of something that you can't handle, that brings you back to a place of in the moment where you are and calming you down, where, you reinforce words of peace to yourself and you tap bilaterally through all of these different areas.
Oh,
Clearly I haven't done it in a minute, so I can't tell you what the areas are or, whatever, but it's very helpful. It's called tapping. You can look it up on Google. It's so cool. And it really helped me, but there's a number of things that are possible, when it comes to grounding. And I'm a big believer in it because, we're talking all about the brain today. And when it comes to the brain, no matter how normal you've been your whole life, when adversity hits and things go wrong, nobody's prepared. I mean, you can have better, like I said, I think that I had a better chance of having a good perspective outlook and, and maintaining hope because of how my mom raised me in early childhood, 1 through 5. But, nobody knows. Nobody is fully prepared for when the worst hits them.
so you've been in recovery for 5 years now, correct?
Yep.
Congratulations.
No.
More?
Wow.
Less?
It's my 5-year anniversary for it. For this right now is for recovering from my brain tumor. In February, I'll be celebrating 11 years sober. And, that's kind of the thing that I can wrap up with my story is that I had, chemicals of all kinds cause the brain to do different things, and coming off of them causes the brain to do different things. And, like I said, I've worked in treatment for at this point, I had worked in treatment for 4 or 5 years, and, had a great working education on all these things, like textbook, if you will. But when it came I'll name the medications, right? Like I was on opiates and I was on benzodiazepines, for my treatment protocol during this time. So when it came time to come off of them, I went through, I knew all the things that were right for me to do, meaning the doctor said I needed to taper, like, take this amount, then start taking a less amount the next, few days and whatever. So, but I was so scared because of what I had initially gone through in my early stages of recovery in 2 parts. I didn't want to be made to feel like an addict in detox, because they offered me, they said, do you want to go do detox somewhere and come off? My body had built up a dependence. No matter, I was using all of my medications exactly how I was supposed to, but it doesn't matter if you're using those narcotics every day. Your body's dependent.
Yeah.
So you're going to go through withdrawals. And that was so scary for me because I had been so diligent to, work hard on my recovery and maintain it and all of the things. And the last thing I wanted to do was feel like I had been a failure or made a wrong choice, or that somebody would see me as someone who did that.
Yeah.
So I made a horrible decision. I flushed all my meds and went cold turkey.
Oh, man.
And if I remember correctly, I had withdrawal symptoms and post-acute withdrawal symptoms that probably lasted about the better part of 2 months.
Oh.
It was really rough. And it was something that, on this side of things, I'm glad that I went through them, because it just gave me, again, another level of compassion for the people that come off of these drugs. It was so different for me than coming off of alcohol. Don't know why, but it was. And it also gave me a new perspective and compassion for all of the people that go through something like I did, except had never had a problem with substances, right? They go either have some type of accident, you name it, get put on painkillers. And when it comes time to get off of them, let me tell you, with all the knowledge in the world and the heart that I had and the passion that I had and the longing to maintain recovery and do all the things that I knew was right, there was a point from when I flushed all my meds to the point that I came out of the back end of post-acute withdrawal syndrome. Actually, there were multiple points where I remember thinking, like, I feel this close from being willing to go illegally buy drugs to make myself not feel this way anymore.
Yeah. Addiction is a very
And
powerful, powerful thing, and our brains are wild.
yeah. So that is the thing that I, chronologically of how things happened. This is where I would talk about it, but I always like to close with it because it's one of, I think, the most important pieces to highlight, because in most cases, narcotics are involved in everybody's journey if it's anything like this one. And it's something to be heavily careful with, considered, talked about, not kept under the rug. You need to be honest with your partner, spouse, family members about your medication, whether you've had a drug problem or not in the past, because it can and will get to anyone. And so that's the biggest message when it comes to that I hope and want people to hear, is that nobody expects you to be the strong person that doesn't struggle when it comes time to come off of these medications. You're not weak. You're not a failure. You're not, any of those things that your mind wants to tell you. And it's better for you to share what you're going through and say, I'm scared, I want help. Don't do what I did. Do a taper or go do a detox somewhere, because it'll be better for you.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah.
I'm so glad you added that. And I don't want to get down this rabbit hole of talking about the show Dope Sick. I don't know if you've watched it. But
oh yeah, just finished it.
Yes. Okay. So that really opened my eyes to opioids. And of course, reporting on the news all the time, you hear about it, but there's always that stigma where you say, oh, those are the drug addicts. We'll put those over in that section. No, these people are normal people that just happen to go on opioids because, like you mentioned, they're in some horrific accident. Maybe, they went through a brain tumor or some sort of body injury like you did. And they need these to help with their pain, and everybody struggles to get off of them. Wow. That show really opened my mind. So everything you just said, I just think you put it so beautifully too, just so you know that. I'm glad you added that.
Thanks.
The last question that I have for you, do you think that you live differently now?
1000% yes.
Do you? Okay.
That is the greatest of all. Again, I say this all the time, to the point where everybody in my life is probably tired of hearing it. They're like, yes, we know, you're so grateful for everything you went through. But this is what I went through is the greatest gift is the perspective and ability to live the way I am now because of the circumstances and experiences that I had, that I was forced into. I'm going to butcher this quote, but they talk about certain metals being forged through fire. Like my fire, the person sitting before you today was forged through a fire that made me who I am. I mean, it's nothing anybody could have ever told me would make it possible for me to appreciate every morning like I do now, would make it possible for me to appreciate every conversation and interaction and connection that I get to experience with another human being, like I do. It truly is a gift. Life's not always sunshines. sunshine and rainbows. Like, I'm not trying to make everybody think that it is that for me, but on this side of things, being a human being that deals with mortality, just like we all do, I think that I was given the opportunity to embrace the lessons, and I chose to do that rather than become a victim and become a lifelong patient. And my providers have told me time and time again that that is the difference. What makes the difference in every patient battling something life-threatening like that, and definitely was in my case, that I wasn't willing to let go. Like, I was determined, and I've just kept on with it.
I'm starting to think, after hearing all of these stories, that our bodies can almost sense that. Like, if you have hope, your body's like, you know what? Yeah, let's hang on. And also, I feel like you're living now the way that all of us should be living. Each day is a blessing. And I think a lot of us, unfortunately, do forget that when life gets busy. So that was a beautiful perspective.
Well, thanks. And, not that I'm this role model that I believe everybody should look to, but like you were saying, if there's anything that I can transmit, one of the biggest parts of my message is just that, I hope you can hear the hope in my voice, and what it is that I can transmit about, I believe that joy is, contagious. I believe that perspective is contagious. That whole thing that people say you're most alike the 6 people you spend the majority of your time around. And I'm a firm believer in that. But I think that the people that outside of those 6 still influence us, right? And so these, having conversations and hearing stories and things like that's one of the reasons why this is my life's passion project, is this podcast, because through telling stories, we provide hope to others.
That's right.
And that's what I want to do.
Patrick, congratulations. Seriously, I had no idea before coming onto this podcast that you dealt with that much. I mean, the brain tumor was enough. I'm like, oh, I thought it was said and done. I had a brain tumor, and here I am, alive and well. But you went through so much. I feel like it's like throwing you a party, It's like, what? It's like,
it's not necessary because life's a party now.
Oh, there you are with the good one-liner. I love it. Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, I'm honored that you shared that entire story with me, and now everybody else gets to hear it too.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Well, thank you. And thanks to everybody that has stuck with us through our regular listeners and viewers, sticking with us through December. We've taken, doing a little something different. And if you're just, you just started tuning in with us, I'm really glad that you have. This month has meant a lot to me. And I know a lot of other people that are hearing these different stories. We typically focus a lot more on addiction and mental health and what have you. And so it's been really neat to take a little bit of a spin on things through the month of December. And so, with that, I will just close out by saying thank you so much, Erica, for coming on and helping me do this episode. And to everyone else, no matter what you're facing, you're always only one decision away from a completely different life. And it's never too late to start loving yourself. So thank you so much, Erica, and everybody else. And with that, we're out.
For more information on today's episode, check out the show notes. Recovery Stories is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 888-648-4098. Or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please share with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. We are grateful for you and hope that you have been encouraged by today's episode. As always, remember you are only one decision away from a completely different life, and it is never too late to start loving yourself.